maybe we don't even need to do our jobs at all, and maybe the jobs we're in don't even need to be here. I think smart companies are going to start to say, this isn't just a tool for automating everybody's individual job. This is a tool for re-engineering the company in general.
You haven't just added AI as a side. You rebuild the entire model in terms of bringing AI at the core. And I think that is quite innovative as an idea. Tell me more about Galileo.
Well, I don't tell this story very often, but I'll tell you guys what we did. So
most CEOs are still treating AI as an experiment, not as a business pivot. In this episode, Josh Bersin, one of the world's leading authorities on work in HR, shows what it really takes to turn deep expertise into scalable AI product, redesign how you create value for clients, and avoid the traps that keeps AI stuck as a shiny toy instead of a growth engine. So if you're still struggling to understand how to create value for the customers with AI, this episode is definitely for you.
We are now living in a world where the first time in the history of humanity, one person gets $1 trillion pay package. You have to give people a sense of psychological safety that they're not going to lose their jobs by experimenting with something new and maybe it doesn't work out.
Do you see a different leadership model in the future?
The role of a leader in an AI-powered company or business is different because a lot of what leaders do is...
Hi everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the World Class Leader Show. So looking forward to this episode in such a great company because today we have Josh Bersin. Over more than 2 decades, Josh has become one of the world's most closely followed analysts on HR and the future work, delivering high-value analysis, market research, and thought leadership. His insights address the people and organizational issues behind business and economic trends, always with a focus on the role of leaders and HR. Josh heads up leading independent human capital advisory firm, the Josh Bersin Company, as well as the high-level 50,000 plus executive network and co-learning community, the Josh Bersin Academy. So, Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So, Josh, as I said, so looking forward to this conversation. And you have such an interesting angle in terms of connecting to me, and then you will tell us more, of course, in a few minutes, the world of HR, the human capital to the world of AI, the next level of innovation, through AI. So, and I'm sure that a lot of people in the audience today either are CEOs or people that are much more operating in the HR space. They're looking for solutions. They're looking to understand how they can really tackle the human side of business and using technology in the best possible way. So I'm sure that will come up in a conversation. So, but if I start with a question about AI, so from your vantage point, because definitely you have that, working with CEOs and chief human resource officers globally, what kind of a AI moment are we really in at the moment? And what are the smartest leaders doing differently? So walk us through the world of AI through your lens.
The AI era is only 3 years old, so a lot has changed in the first few years of this. And I think the beginning of it was exploration and discovery. This was actually a useful technology, and that happened pretty quickly, although in the beginning, everybody wasn't even sure if it was going to work. And then it turned into assistant. And so the first manifestation of AI was, we're each going to have a little AI assistant and we're going to ask it for help and it's going to improve our productivity in the job that we're in now. And then we realized, well, it's actually more than that because it can actually do things for us. So let's call it an agent and let's assume that it has agency of its own and then we're going to give it directives and tasks and program it a little bit and it will do work for us. And maybe we don't have to do so much work. In fact, maybe we don't even need to do our jobs at all. And maybe the jobs we're in don't even need to be here. So we've been going through this cycle now, figuring out what are the things that can be automated, what tasks, what roles, what jobs, what positions. And there's a lot of experimentation. But where it's going to go next year, in my opinion, and this has been going on all over HR. And so this is happening in recruiting and training and employee support and all sorts of, bureaucratic things that HR people do, is I think in 2026, it's going to be even more interesting because what AI is really good at is not just automating tasks, but doing things across a domain of tasks in an integrated way. And the analogy that I have been using that's the most useful to understand is a self-driving car. The beginning of a self-driving car was actually in the 1960s when we had power steering, power brakes, lane control, collision detection. things like that, that were small pieces, sort of like AI type of technology that would automate the driver to make the driver's job easier or the driver safer or perhaps a little bit faster or navigate in the right direction. And then somebody said, well, wait a minute, the purpose of the car is not to make it a good experience for the driver, unless you're driving a sports car. The purpose of the car is to get the passenger from point A to point B. So what if we assume, let's just forget about the driver, and let's just worry about the car and this problem of moving somebody from point A to point B. And we ended up with a much more complex AI, what I call super agent, that has a bunch of agents in it. And that's where AI is going, because if you think about, all of the business processes I've been involved in, sales, marketing, product management, engineering, support, consulting, et cetera, they all stand alone as little silos that are functional silos with job families in them. And that's an artifact of the industrial age. If we had agents that could take you across those AI, the AI could identify, if you knew what the product was, the AI could identify target audiences, send messages to those audiences to get them interested in the product, bring them down the learning curve to see if they're qualified to sales, and actually make them proposals and do pre-sales, do marketing, do lead generation. So I'm just thinking about sort of the flow of all these things that go on inside companies. I think smart companies are going to start to say, this isn't just a tool for automating everybody's individual job. This is a tool for re-engineering the company in general. So we're at that stage. And I think in 2026, because there's more interoperability between the independent agents, I think the vendors of AI and the implementers of AI are going to build much more enterprise-wide applications. And then we get into this lots of issues about how the company is structured and how we have data and information in silos and what we do to bring it together. So I think if you're a CEO, you've got to think this way about what can you do to fall in love with the problem, not the solution, and think about what you're trying to accomplish as a whole, because it isn't that hard to program AI. The other thing that's unique about AI that we haven't had in a lot of these technologies before is you don't have to be a computer scientist to program it. Whereas, in most of the IT technologies I've been involved in, you got to have a professional software engineer and a UI designer and a database designer and et cetera to get anything to even work. So it's a very transformational technology for C-level executives.
It is. And there are two things that struck me from what you said. So one is, by the way, something I did not yet fully consider until you said it. So it's the idea of potentially AI could be one of the best possible enablers to provide integration organization versus a very silos way of operating, right? And to me, that's something that I don't think CEOs, maybe the Smart West do, but many other leaders, I don't think they got there yet. I think that, as you said, it's more about automated tasks and improving productivity. But the level of integration, which is very strategic or redefining their business model as an organization, is a different game.
Well, it does take a different mindset, and maybe because I've been an analyst so long, I've had the freedom to do this. But I always look at these things like, why do we have the marketing department getting an argument with the sales department about the quality of the leads? Why do we have the sales department getting an argument with the customer service department about whether the customers are going to renew? This is one big chain. It's all connected. The only reason we have these departments is because we never had any software that really connected it very well. So I'm sure this is going to happen. We're going to have things that look like agents doing one thing, they're actually doing. I mean, I know this in recruiting, for example, in HR, the recruiting process is enormously complex. And so somebody opens a job rack and then somebody has a debate about what the level of the job is and what's the right title and what are the skills we need. And then we go out and we search for the person and then we source it and then we place a bunch of ads. Then we do a bunch of pre-hired screening. Then we do interviewings, et cetera. Big, complicated process. What an AI would do, and they're just beginning to come to market, is it would look at that spot and it would say, okay, is there an internal candidate for this? Yeah, here's somebody over here that's qualified right now. Why don't you talk to them first? You want to hire them in this city? Well, actually, this other city is going to be better for you because in this city, there are very few of those people, etc.
Yeah, it's a great example. I think you just You just shared a very practical and simple example how integration through agents actually will make things easier and better because they're much more integrated. And I think also my experience with a lot of companies, Josh, is there's so much work that gets repeated in organizations. So more people doing the same thing. Because when you work in isolation, in silos organizations, people are not really clear or aware about what's happening on the other side. So I think to me that could be a great way positioning it.
So one of our clients is a large ad agency. They have about 110,000 employees. And so they're implementing a new AI system for ad placement. And so they wanted to design the job roles that would use it and teach everybody how to use it. They did an analysis of the job titles. There were almost 85,000 job titles, 115,000 employees. So almost everybody in that company had a specialized job title. So the organization looks at it, it's like, how are we going to implement this when we really don't know what all these people are doing?
Yes. Oh, totally.
And a lot of
Totally.
companies are like that.
Yes, there are. Totally. And the bigger, the worse, right? So the bigger is the less control and understanding and knowledge about their own people. So talking about your clients, Josh, I mean, um, when was the time for you to start rethinking about the business model of how you operating, for example, with clients?
I worked in sales and marketing and product management for about 20 years before I got into this HR stuff, and I stumbled into it by accident when I was essentially leaving a company I went to work for a startup and got involved in online learning. So my early entry into the HR world was in the online learning world as an entrepreneur in a small company. And what I realized was that once I got into the training industry and saw what everybody was doing there and learned about leadership development and succession and all these funky HR things, I was scratching my head and thinking, nobody really asks enough questions as to why they're doing it this way. It's just everybody's copying GE. At the time, everybody was copying GE. We like GE's HR. We're going to copy everything they do.
By the way, right now they're still copying other models from other companies, so that is still ongoing.
But I think what happened during my, work, my period of time, is that a bunch of things changed that forced HR to get a lot smarter and a lot more creative. We had skills shortages, we had demographic changes, we had the pandemic, we had a couple of the 2008 recession, and then the 2000 recession, and all of a sudden, all of those standard models of HR just broke down, and people became very creative. And I found that my particular personality, and I'm kind of a scientist at heart, is that applying some rigor to studying this was really useful to HR people, because the only way they would learn something would be to go to a conference and meet somebody that did something and say, "Oh, that's such a good idea. We're going to do that." Right. And and then we didn't know, so my buddy and we didn't know how to monetize this. So we originally sold subscriptions to our research. We didn't realize there was a company called the Corporate Executive Board that was doing this. We didn't even know they existed. And then we realized, we have to do more than just sell people content. We have to give them some education. So we did more things. We built an academy. I sold the first company to Deloitte, and then I spent 7 years there and came back, and after I left Deloitte, and did it again. And then our latest thing is we took all of the research we've done and that we continue to do, and we put it into an AI agent of our own. So people can either call us or read what we do, or they can just talk to our agent and get advice, and it can do all sorts of things that we don't do, very productively ourselves. So we're becoming an AI-powered advisory and research firm. That's kind of cool.
It is, and by the way, I think what struck me as well on your experience on Galileo is you haven't just added AI as a side, as an additional service to your customer. You rebuild the entire model in terms of bringing AI at the core, and I think that is quite innovative as an idea. Tell me more about Galileo. So what?
I don't tell this story very often, but I'll tell you guys what we did. So my business partner this time is a very operationally focused person, and I told him at the beginning of ChatGPT, By the way, after all these years doing all this research, I was always frustrated that we would produce this beautiful report, we'd stick it on a website, and nobody could find it. And maybe they didn't even read it because they didn't have time. So we talked to them on the phone, and they're like, well, you didn't even read what we did, so I guess we got to talk it through for you guys. And we didn't have podcasts, and we didn't have webinars and all that stuff at the time. So AI comes along, and my first reaction was, holy smokes, what would happen if we put our content in there? Would it make it easier for people to find it? So we built a prototype. We have thousands of research reports, and we have case studies, and we have vendor reports and stuff. So we put it all in there, and all of a sudden it was like, whoa, this is way more than a search engine. You can ask this thing's questions, and it answers as if it's me. So I sort of woke up that day with the guy I was working with, and I said, whoa, this thing is smarter. This thing is the equivalent of all of the analysts we've ever had working for us all in one thing. And it's actually smarter than that because it updates itself all the time, and it gets smarter the more questions you ask it. So anyway, so we did all that. We launched it. We decided to give it a name and all that. And we decided, and people kept saying things like, well, we'd like to put our content into it and mix our HR stuff with your HR stuff so that it's really personalized to our company. So we put it into a more robust platform. And the next thing you know, we're in the product business of selling this product, which basically is an HR expert in and of itself. And everybody the next question they would ask is, well, we want you to, put your academy, put your professional training in there. So we added a whole bunch of training content into it. So it now does training and agent stuff. And then we realized we need to change the way we operate the company, because the way we've been set up for all these years is we've got research people that do research. We write reports. We have a publishing group. We create these beautiful PDFs. Then we have a website. Then we maintain the website. Then we publish stuff on the website. Well, with Galileo, we don't really need the website as much. We still have it, but we're probably not going to need it forever. And the publishing group really isn't that important because we can stick the content in Galileo and it doesn't have to look quite so beautiful because they can read it as they need it. So we squashed the publishing group into the product group that was building Galileo, and now it's one big group. And now we're doing things like, when we do research, we develop the prompts for Galileo so people will immediately know how to find it and use it. So we're already evolved from studying a problem and writing a beautiful report or a maturity model to diagnosing the way somebody will apply that problem to different industries or different businesses, all in the one big fell swoop because we have the AI. And of course, our analysts can do market research and market scanning so much faster than they could before. We used to basically spend like 6 weeks or 2 months just doing market scanning before we even start doing research. So we can do that in a couple of days. And now the next step for us is, now that we have, 5,000 or 6,000 people using it in different companies, is using the information that they're gathering and getting smarter. So like we have this interesting thing that just happened where the airline, we have a lot of airline clients, the IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association. There's a woman there who's really cool. She took Galileo and she loaded all of the aeronautic job role and skills data from Boeing and Airbus. Boeing and Airbus create all sorts of skills models for airlines so they know how to run their planes. So they took all that data, a bunch of data from a bunch of airlines, and they stuck it in Galileo, and they built a skills model for all of the major roles in the airline industry with 5 levels of proficiency and what is the skill level going to change in the next 2 years around AI. And then they did an analysis and they said, well, based on this demographic data we have about the global travel market, what would that skill set look like in the US versus South America versus the Middle East versus Asia? And so they built this globalized skill model for the airline industry. So we're working with them now to roll that model out to the 300 airlines that they do business with. And, we as an analyst firm writing research reports would have been impossible to do something like that. So it's taking us places that just get us closer and closer and closer to solving the problem we're trying to solve, which is to help companies manage their people better.
So what's your ambition for Galileo? So do you see expanding only in terms of clients or in terms of, I'm sure there is way more than that.
I mean, the best model that I can find out there is the Bloomberg terminal of HR, the Bloomberg
Okay.
terminal of talent, the Bloomberg terminal of management and leadership. And we're not that far away from that. I mean, we don't have the distribution they do or the sales force they do, but it does actually fulfill that goal when you use it. And the people that use it just love it. So and it leverages our intellectual property. You can use ChatGPT. Any question you ask Galileo, you could ask ChatGPT, and it'll give you a reasonable answer. But you don't really know where the answer came from. It could be a listicle that some publicist wrote from some magazine, and you don't really know if it's true. So in our case, the information always has examples, case studies, benchmarks, et cetera, that it's hard to get on your own. So that's kind of as far as the second manifestation of it for us is it's a teaching tool because we're not a consulting firm. So we want to teach people how to solve these problems on their own, not do it for them. So we have this educational AI connected to Galileo that builds videos and courses. And so you can ask, and there's an interface to it called the Super Tutor. So you could go to it and say, teach me how to build a skills taxonomy for an oil and gas drilling engineer. And then you could say, show me an example of a company that's done this. How would this apply in the UK versus the US? What would be the difference between the skills taxonomy in the drilling part of the business versus the refining part of the business? I mean, you can just ask it questions and it'll literally teach you things, most of which we have in our database already. And what we're finding is that's the way people want to learn. They don't really want to take courses that often. Occasionally, they would like to just get intelligence answers to questions. So it's a very powerful platform. I think we're just beginning to see the opportunities for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's primarily for not necessarily advisory consulting firm, but whoever company that has something to say, because yes, it's sitting on a pile
I
of
would think law
experiences,
firms,
research.
consulting.
Yeah.
See, the problem with law firms and consulting firms, and because I worked at Deloitte, is their business model is tied to hourly billing.
Yes, it's time and
We don't
material
care if
thing.
they ever call us again.
No, I know. That's why it's a totally
I mean,
different
if they're
business
getting their
model.
problem solved, they don't need to call us. If they want to, they can.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, my point is, all these firms, and by the way, there are also other B2B organization. I don't know, B2C maybe, but I'm thinking more in the B2B environment right now. They're really sitting on a pile of experience and research or learning from the past based on the clients they had, all they would have done. And every single time they need to either create something new with a client or they need to tap into whatever had in their, memory. But I think that, an agent like this can really simplify life for them. And then I think it's more scalable as well.
I wish there were more tools like this out there. I wish there was one for tax planning. I mean, maybe there is one. It's actually more work than it looks, though. It isn't just a matter of taking a bunch of your stuff and sticking it in there. You got to manage it and label it, and there's work to do. But
I
it's going to
overly
be
simplified for
no. I
as
mean, I
a, as
think
an
there's a lot
England.
of. I think about this all the time because, see, Andrea, we get questions that range from should I buy Workday versus SAP to how do I redesign the job of my recruiters, or how do I hire more, retail workers faster, or what do I do about this pay equity problem? Or, I mean, there are thousands, we have 400 prompts already based on questions we get, and people are coming up with new ideas all the time. So it's a business model or a business where you start to learn much, much more about your clients than you ever did before. And you're, as opposed to what we did at Deloitte, which was, would you like some consulting? Yes. Okay. We'll be there tomorrow with 50 people and we'll get started.
Yeah, and I just want to say hi to all the Deloitte guys.
And
I
nothing against Deloitte, but it's just,
No,
and
I
they
know
made a
it's the
ton of money
model.
doing that really well. So we're just in a different
Yes.
space.
Yes. No, the reason I'm saying primarily about Deloitte, because I work quite closely with Deloitte, so I had an opportunity to experience the way of working. I think it's very similar. I think you're totally right. Now, if we shift a little bit conversation to the world of CEO, given what we just said, all the opportunity that is there, um, what do you think any CEO that at the moment is not there yet? It doesn't really yet understand, the power that can be created, generated by AI in the way that you describe it. What could be some of the big moves or way for them to start?
Every company's got different opportunities. L'Oreal built an AI called Beauty Genius. L'Oreal has thousands of beauty products, hair care, skin care, eyes, etc. They sell them all as independent brands. This Beauty Genius AI allows you to tell it, what you're interested in improving in your appearance, and it picks stuff for you and recommends things. And they've had 100 million people use it. So in sales, lead gen, sort of product experience, there's massive opportunities. In customer service, you have call centers, you have people picking up the phone, getting help with your product or pricing or returning things. That's very immature yet in terms of what AI could do there, especially since the AI could look at every product you've ever bought and learn about who you are and give you personalized support and experiences around that. I talked about HR. There's dozens of opportunities for better hiring, leadership development. By the way, CEOs may not worry about this, but they probably do. What do I need to do to develop my leaders, to make sure my managers are well trained, that they're getting the support they need? Well, there's 1,000 consultants, and Andrea, I don't want to step on your toes.
No, but you're right.
But
You're
AI
right.
coaches actually are not bad. Galileo is
Yeah,
amazingly smart about management things. So there's those
totally.
opportunities. Manufacturing, supply chain. There's just tons of opportunities for this. And the thing that's cool about this technology, at least my experience with it, I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I didn't touch the code at all. I had one engineer help me with the prototype. The rest of it's been just understanding the business we're in and getting to know the environment, that you can spin up these kinds of projects without, hiring a $5 million consultant to build something from scratch. If you can conceive of the problem and the domain well, I think companies have lots of opportunities for value creation here.
But you think that they see these opportunities, or they're so much stuck into the AI technology, like, oh, if we don't understand it, we cannot use it.
I think some people are getting it. I think you have to sort of say, what if we did it this way? I think you need a few people, and this may be your job as a CEO if you're that type of person, or maybe it's your COO or somebody else. What if we rethought how we did X? Every company I've ever worked in, there's frustratingly complicated things about sales, marketing, support, consulting, renewals, pricing, etc., that are, usually multifunctional groups of people that are coming together to try to solve these problems, and they each have their own little domains. Every time that happens, there's an AI agent that could work across that group. So I think CEOs just need to read more, probably case studies of examples, and say, wow, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah, and to me, I think, Josh, is also a function of how little time CEOs, but broadly speaking, many leaders spend outside of their own company. So there's so much stuck. So from one end, I think has to be an element of curiosity, curious enough to trying to relook at the problem they're facing in a different way, right?
I think you don't have to be that curious. I think the best source of information is to get really close to your customers. Let me give you an example. So one of the companies we do a lot of work with in HR is a company called UKG. They're a $5 billion payroll type company, but their really big product is workforce scheduling, shift management, hourly management of hourly pay. So you would think that's a fairly simple problem. You figure out how many hours somebody works and you give them a scheduling system to schedule a shift. No, it's 100 times more complicated than that, because there's dynamic labor we got too many customers this week. How do we get more people to come in this weekend? Oh, this person's sick and they're the only one that's trained on this thing, so we can't get anybody else to take their place. How do we find somebody else? There's a million things like that. So what they did is the new CEO at UKG's, she's been there a couple of years. She spent a lot of time getting to know these detailed issues in manufacturing, in retail, in transportation, many associate. There's all sorts of companies that have lots and lots of contract labor, and they've built all sorts of new agents that do dynamic workforce scheduling, labor planning. You don't know the cost of your labor when you have all sorts of overtime. Like all of a sudden you need a bunch of people to come in over the weekend. You just wrecked up your labor cost because they're all getting charged overtime. There's no planning systems for that. And they got all those ideas from their big customers. So I think one of the ways to come up with new ideas for AI is to just go sit in front of your biggest client or a couple of your biggest customers and let them tell you what they're trying to do. And you might go back to the office and say, wow, we could solve this.
To me, that's connected to the point I was making in terms of, look, everybody says, we need to get closer to the customer. We need really to listen to what they're saying. But the reality from my place is yes and no, meaning they say so, but they don't really do it. So, or at least not everybody. So there is still tendency of looking too much inward and looking at their own company as if they know exactly what their customer is expecting.
Listen, I'm not certainly the one to give CEOs advice, but I do think, having run 2 companies myself, that all of the good ideas come from your customers. I mean, every single one. Now, and so, you can't be with them all day. If you're not talking to the salespeople at least and getting really close to them and also deciding who your customer is. I think there's also this very difficult problem of, is this our target customer or is this an oddball customer that maybe shouldn't even be a customer or shouldn't even be a focus area? That isn't easy to do until you've spent a lot of time with them, and you'll see opportunities for adjacent customers that you didn't know existed or ecosystems that you didn't know existed. So, no matter how, even if you're a really, really good internal person and really understand operations well, someone in the company has to be out there.
And also that remind me, one of the last question I had, Josh, for you. I had on the show Chris O'Neill, so he's quite well popular CEOs in the Bay Area, as far as I remember. And Chris said, look, we talked a lot about AI, and Chris also introduced this idea, which really, again, I still remember. He said, in a new world of AI agents, but also people working on AI agents. So people, they are the programmers, the people that essentially they do the work, right? So looking at the future, if the organization started to be much more AI driven in the way how they work as well internally, even the leadership model potentially will be different, meaning how you're leading the people that are working on it, because there's so much more integration in working together. But on the other hand, there is a risk of people are going to do their own job, but then get disconnected with where the company is going. So do you see that as a risk too? So because I could have asked you another question, but that's going to be the traditional question I don't want to ask. Like, do you see a risk really for people there in the future not working in an organization? I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask you, do you see a different leadership model in the future?
Andrea, we're way ahead of you. We already wrote a report on the super manager. Well, we've
We've
already worked on this. We've heard this a lot. So far, it's a little hard to tell where this is going to go. So far, we definitely see that the role of a leader in AI-powered company or business is different, because a lot of what leaders do is directing people, supervising people, monitoring people. The AI is going to do a lot of that. And then you have to facilitate experimentation and encourage experimentation so people learn how to use the AI to do their jobs better. And then you have to find people that are really advanced thinkers and bring them forward, because they may be somewhere over in the corner and nobody knows who they are. So there's other things that leaders can do in an AI powered organization that may not be traditional leadership capabilities. We have a 2x2 that sort of shows that to people. The way I visualized it was, You've got the speed, the rate of change of technology is like almost a vertical line. I mean, you can draw it sloping up steeper and steeper and steeper. The rate of change of your company is like this. Companies don't move that fast. Well, all the stuff in the middle, jobs, people worried about their role, to give up their title, not wanting to move, not sure what the heck's going on, protecting their turf, blah, blah. That's what's getting in the way. So the super managers are the ones that are bending that curve up. The company can adapt to the AI. And they don't have to be the technical people, but if they're not facilitating this, I mean, I see this all the time. One of the CHROs I admire a lot the other day said to me, as soon as we heard this AI stuff start to hit the streets, we asked everybody to give us the best ideas they had on what to do with it. And we had 2,000 ideas. And she said, and then what we did is we put together a rubric for how we're going to evaluate all these ideas. And we sat down as a management team and we went through the 2,000 and we broke it down to about 15 things that we were going to focus on. And we said, of these 2,000, maybe 1,000 of them were going to say, don't bother. 500 or 600 were going to say, do whatever you want. Good luck. We hope they work out. And then a couple of them we're going to invest in at a corporate level. That's a super manager behavior that a lot of leaders have never done, or maybe they're not familiar with. So I think there are some tech guys, and I just talked to somebody the other day who said, I think there's going to be so many agents, I'm going to run 5 companies. I think he's crazy, but Elon Musk does it. So, eventually there will be people that do, super, super, super leak. I mean, here's another thing that I think I bring this up with HR people all the time. We are now living in a world where the first time in the history of humanity, one person gets $1 trillion pay package. Now, I don't think you could argue that maybe it's silly. We now live in a world where people that know how to leverage AI 100 times more valuable than those that don't. So think about that as a manager. If you have a 5-point performance score curve. So I think we've got to, revisit what managers do in this world.
Definitely with you, Josh. Is the current model, to me, it will be very soon obsolete or outdated because there will be a different skills, but also I would say a different mindset that would be required to operate in the environment. At some point, skills are the skills, but to me, what I'm more interested about is what mindset will enable people to work in a different way. It has to be always back to the mindset, how people
and you have to give
things.
people a sense of psychological safety that they're not going to lose their jobs by experimenting with something new and maybe it doesn't work out. I mean, there's very subtle cultural things that happen in these high, fast-moving companies.
Totally. I mean, the ability for organizations to become risk takers has to be at different level in the environment that we are just portraying. Josh, that was such a great conversation. So where people should know more about you, should learn what you do, what you're up to?
Well, you can go to our website, which is joshbersin.com. And then we have, all over social media and LinkedIn. And then go to getgalileo.com if you want to check out Galileo. And we've tried to price Galileo so that you can get your hands on it and get the world's best HR and management consultant for a bargain.
Right. That is a great sales message at the end of this hour conversation. So, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really, really valuable.
Thank you, Andrea.